the interest of time, I'm going to kick us off, and I know we'll have some more people hop on in a few minutes. And I know it's the middle of the day, in the middle of the dog days of summer. But I want to welcome my friend, Kat Armstrong, to talk with us. This is something actually that Andrea Mitchell and I have talked about for a while, and we'll try to dig into like some of the fun backstory. But I wanted to introduce Kat, and then she's going to tell you a lot more about not only herself, but her ministry, her history, her background, all that good stuff. But here's how we met. So Kat and I actually, Kat, I don't know that we overlapped, but I feel like we could have overlapped even talking to Aaron. I finished at Dallas Seminary in 2006. And I don't know if you guys were there yet. But and then I got into counseling, and I started a counseling practice in Dallas called Sparrow House Counseling. And while I was there, I kept hearing from my good friend and old professor, Glenn Kreider, that there was a new like women in the marketplace ministry that had begun called, at the time, Polish, which soon became the Polished Network, and that you were behind it, and we had mutual friends. And so I kept hearing all about you, but of course, you know how God is. It takes me moving away to Northwest Arkansas, and we get introduced through a really great mutual friend and another ministry that we've both been able to be a part of. So we have a lot of overlapping relationships. Kat is a wife and mom. Her husband, Aaron, is pastor of Dallas Bible Church in Dallas. But she's also an author. I actually had read at least one of your books before I ever met you. And currently she's got 2 Bible studies coming out next month. So she can tell you all about that. So what I wanted to share, the reason I wanted to have you on, Kat, one, I love how the Spirit has used you strategically as a pastor teacher, as someone who loves to study and loves to teach, but also someone who loves to inspire, like specifically women in the marketplace. And he's been doing that for a long time. And you've got a long history of various entrepreneurship ideas and whatnot. So what I'd love for you to do is, tell us a little bit about yourself, but then like give us some backstory, because you specifically were able to use the industry of network marketing at a really incredible time while you were going through seminary. And I want to hear some of that story. And I've told you a little bit, we've got some Plexus team members on. We've got people who haven't even started with Plexus, but maybe they're curious. Most likely, we've probably got some people from other companies that'll be hopping on or listening later. So, and then folks who are just, doing ministry out in the world. So tell us your background, and then I want some history on some of your network marketing background.
Yeah, Becky, I wonder if we had classes or were on campus at the same time, because I was at Dallas Seminary from 2004 until 2011. So I managed to stretch a 2-year degree out into 8.
Hey, you're hardcore. You were in for the long haul, girl.
I loved it. I kept auditing courses that I didn't need and regretted I didn't get the higher degree. But
I would still go back. I would go back.
Absolutely. That's why I'm back in school now. I just absolutely love school. Well, guys, I'm so grateful to spend some time with you. Becky said it at the beginning of our time together. It's the dog days of summer. It's late afternoon. Thank you that you would even want to share this time with me. What a privilege. So I'm a Bible teacher and an author. That's primarily who I am, but I have a day job as the director of leadership processes for Integris Leadership, a company that does executive coaching for ministry leaders. I teach Sunday school for the 4th and 5th graders at my church. And so they're just like you. I have multi-passion life. There's all sorts of things that I enjoy, all sorts of things that I do. And my quick story, Becky, is that I came to faith at the age of 16. So I'm a Christ follower because 2 working women who worked full time shared the gospel with me at their place of work. They were educators, and I know that that's a whole thing now, but they were educators, and they shared the gospel with me, and I came to faith. And I think, Becky, because professional women led me to Jesus, I couldn't wait to support and encourage working women when I became one myself, when I got out of seminary and out of college. And I started pursuing Jesus by going to an adult Sunday school class at my church in Houston. And so I was 17 years old. I was choosing not to go to the youth group because I literally am no fun. Like I just am like, I don't do skits. I'm not going to camp. I didn't know Jesus. And then all of a sudden I wanted to know everything about the Bible. And so my youth pastor at the time said, you need to go to this adult Sunday school class that has a really Southern lady with really Southern hair. She teaches the Bible line by line, and she passes out these notes at the end of Sunday school class. Well, it turns out I started sneaking into Beth Moore's 600-person Sunday school class at Houston's First Baptist Church. And I did that between the ages of 17 and 19 until I went off to college at A&M. And because Beth Moore was my Sunday school teacher, I had no idea that she was like publishing or that she had a reputation outside of our church. She was just the lady that seemed to be really excited about the Bible, and it was infectious. Like she bubbled over that desire to study scripture. And so I left for college having a conversation with her, and Beth saying, it seems like you've got a real passion for scripture. Maybe you should go to seminary. And Becky, I thought that was a city. I'd never heard of seminary. And so I was like, where's that? She's like, no, honey, it's grad school for the Bible. There's lots of them. And I said, where's the nearest one? She said, there's one in Dallas. And I was like, done. Like I was 19 years old, a freshman in college. My Sunday school teacher said I should go to seminary. They said there was one in Dallas. That was it. So went to Dallas Seminary with my husband. We've been married for 21 years. We have one son, Caleb, who's 10. My mom lives with us. A part of my backstory, Becky, is that on my dad's side of the family tree is just broken limbs of people's lives that have been devastated by untreated mental illness and substance abuse. And the combination has led to lots of suicidal ideation and lots of suicide. And my father's death by suicide 6 years ago, really rocked me. And that's why my mom lives with us now. And it's a really neat part of our redemption story. But that's what really got me into publishing. When you lose someone that means something to you, you go to the drawing board of your life and you're like, is my life the way I want it to be? If it's not, you feel a real motivation once you work through some of the grief to be like, life is short. Is there something I want to do? And my heart is to write Bible studies that make people curious about the Bible. But I think one of the reasons, Becky, you wanted to have me on today is that I'm a huge advocate of network marketing companies. The only way I paid for seminary and for my husband's THM degree is by selling Arbonne. So I still am obsessed with Arbonne. I use the 50,000 step process on this face. Like if it's not Arbonne, it does not touch anything going up, I drove the white Mercedes. I had 4 people under me with the Mercedes. I loved the vacations they sent me on. And I look back just so grateful that that kind of industry exists for people who need some flexibility and want a lot of upward mobility and can do it without spending tons on education.
Yeah. And I love about how you talk about how it not only helped put you through seminary, but it helped put Aaron through seminary as well. Sounds like it was a tool that helped you guys achieve, especially at that season in your life, some things that you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. Can I share with you and get some thoughts from you, Kat, about some of the pushback that I know I had coming into network marketing and what I think a lot of women and men who come into it sometimes have. And I think a lot of it is, I grew up in a ministry family. My dad's been a pastor since before I was born. And I know that sometimes, just especially in old school ministry families, there's some weird stuff about money, right? Like I've joked about how I kind of was raised with this idea that wealth is holy, or sorry, that poverty is holy and wealth is evil. So some messed up things also, like if someone's paid too well, especially if a pastor is paid too well, there've been this idea that that was appropriate. But let me talk with you about some of the kickbacks that I hear from people that I talk to about network marketing, and just get some of your thoughts. Sorry, I'm pulling up our notes. So I want to know, like, what would you call a biblical view of work?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I have to say, Becky, one, if I get the Zoom demons and something weird happens with my audio, I'm going to call in and call you. Okay, you have to call
Okay,
me.
perfect.
Figure it
I'm
out.
prepared.
First, I wanted to make a comment about something you said earlier. I tell people that I had friends who spent $50,000 on an MBA at SMU, Southern Methodist University in town. And when I was building my Arbonne business for 5 or 8 years, I felt like I got a free MBA. They paid me, money to learn about professional development. And I'm still in professional development as an executive coach to ministry leaders because of my experience with Arbonne. Because when you're in network marketing, you're reading personal development books, you're a part of a team, like you're learning things that people pay thousands of dollars in an MBA program, but you're getting to make money while you're doing it, and you don't leave with debt. So I'm such a huge proponent of this industry, first of all. Second, as the executive director, co-founder, and a board member of the Polish Network for over a decade, we were emboldening working women in their faith and their work. And the way, Becky, we were emboldening them was showing them that work was a part of God's plan before the fall. So in the garden, God gives men and women a task. He says to rule and subdue the world. So that's part of our calling in life. That's part of our faith and work movement, is to rule and subdue the world, to be God's vice regents, to be the people he has chosen to oversee everything he created. And then additionally, to multiply, to replicate. And he doesn't just mean through biological children, because then Jesus wouldn't have been able to fulfill that calling, because he was single and didn't have biological children, neither did Paul. So obviously what that means, to rule, subdue, and to multiply, is to make other people, to make disciples, right? Followers of God. And also to care for and oversee everything that God's created. So work was always good. It was always good. After the fall, it got harder because they were agriculturally focused in the Near Eastern culture. And so obviously toiling over the land, or making the soil hard to sow seeds into, made work harder, but work was always good. And so I think, tragically, Becky, there have been some misogynistic, unbiblical views that tear scripture out of its context to keep women from being in the workforce. We couldn't see anything farther from the truth. I mean, we have examples of female leaders dating back to the first worship leader of the nation of Israel was Miriam, Moses' sister. And that we see prophetesses like Hudlah, who are exegeting the scriptures for King Josiah. I've been to Israel. I've been on the steps of the temple. She had her own section of the temple because she was employed there, working not only to understand the scriptures and the scrolls, but taking care of all the garments of all the priests. So women have always been contributing financially to ministry work and employed in ministry work. Obviously, we have Luke chapter 8, where Jesus is being financially supported by a small group of wealthy women who had been released from demon possession and who were traveling with him, whether they were married or single. We have married women who left time with their husband to go and follow Jesus as one of his disciples. So even if we go to the Proverbs 31 woman, Becky, she is making a lot of money for her family. Looks like she's really good at real estate, in addition to doing some home goods where she was sewing and making things with her hands. She's never idle. And it looks like she has enough money from her contributions to the family to buy and sell expensive land, to travel to get these goods from international places. So we just women are just busy in the scriptures, getting things done for the kingdom, but also, my favorite person in the whole Bible, she inspired the Polish Network, Becky. I'm sorry, I'm getting preachy. I mean, you cannot.
No, and I was going to say, you need to plug She's the First at this point too, because it's such a good.
Yeah, it's like you can't ask a Bible teacher to talk about women working in the Bible. But my favorite person in all of scripture is Lydia of Philippi. And she's in Acts chapter 16. Paul, Silas, Timothy, and Luke go there to share the gospel in the whole continent of Europe. This is their first stop. She's the first Christian convert in Europe. She's the first church planter in Europe. She's the reason the gospel gets out of Jerusalem, Judea, to Samaria and the ends of the earth. And it's because Lydia, this super wealthy businesswoman, had so much influence in her city. And now we know from historical context that there's inscriptions of her all over the city. She was wealthy, she was influential, she was dealing purple cloth and purple dye. And whether that meant she was a seller or a dealer or an importer, any way you work it, Becky, she is the reason the gospel thrived in Philippi. And she had a big enough home to host the church. She was the patron of the church in Philippi. And she was so persuasive and influential. And that came from her sales background, because after Paul and Silas get out of jail in Philippi, they go back to her house for safekeeping before they move on. And after she comes to faith, it says that she persuaded them, which means with brute force in the Greek. It literally means she was like, yo, come into my house. Everyone in my family is coming to faith in Jesus, and we're all getting baptized. So all that to say, what's my biblical view of work? Women are always working. Now, sometimes we're doing unpaid work when we're focused on our family, aging parents, but everyone's working. And what we see in the new Garden City, by the time you get to Revelation, is there's going to be work for us to do there too.
Yes.
It's going to be awesome.
I love it. And I always think about how the Holy Spirit had to go out of his way to get Paul to engage with Lydia. It was like, no, you've got to go here. I love it. I knew you were going to say Lydia. I know your heart for Lydia. And I think it was hearing you teach about her that had me go deep dive into her as well. So and speak with my daughter about her so that she understands who Lydia is. Okay. So you've covered this somewhat, but in the modern age, we tend to do this parallel of like, well, I've got work and then I've got ministry. And those two things are parallel lines. They don't intersect. And it has a lot to do with some of the cultural thinking we have. But where do you see ministry and work colliding, intersecting? What does that look like, do you think? And how do you want us to think about that?
Oh, this is so complex, Becky, because it does have a lot to do with culture, and it has a lot to do with our parents' generation influencing us, right or wrong. They had a certain way of doing things when it came to work and to ministry. For many of our parents' age, you started a company and you worked there for 40 years until you retired. And now we know that in our geriatric millennial age and Gen Z and all the generations in the workplace now, that you rarely stay the same place more than 3 years. You're usually having multiple streams of income because of the debt ratio in our country and the cost of education and home prices, the stuff that our parents' generation just didn't have to deal with. And so now we're finding ourselves going, okay, how do we identify in the workplace when we are a Christ follower, a network marketer, have a side hustle, do something with our husband, also planning a church, homeschooling a little bit. People have become what I call multi-passion. And now it's a little bit more acceptable. I think, Becky, it has a lot to do with the way we brand and market ourselves. And I know that can make us feel a little uncomfortable, but ultimately the way I present myself on social media is trying to communicate a reality about my life. And we call that marketing in my marketing degree from A&M. You know, when we're trying to shape perception of reality, that's what it is. And so how we present ourselves now, I think we have to be clear and say things like, I'm a multi-passion person. You know, I'm on this board, I do this thing. This is where a lot of my income comes from. This is my passion project, is the storyline. I identify as a Bible teacher. Like, that's probably the truest thing about who I am. We kind of have to tell people how to interpret us, how to understand us in this world. And so I think it's important that we're honest from the front. Here are all the things that I do, or here are the things that make me passionate. But I hear what you're saying, Becky. I think there's definitely concern for ministry people that, number one, you could make too much money and no one wants to end up on Preachers and Sneakers Instagram account. You know, like, none of us want to be up here with our, you know, $1,000 shoes being made fun of or being called attention to. But on the flip side, do we have permission to use our work to benefit the common good? Yes, that's what we're called to do. I mean, that's why we're working and contributing to the common good, so we can benefit other people. So I don't think we should feel weird about making money. And I know what you're saying, Becky, about we grew up with generations of ministry-minded people that were like, to be poor is like godliness. But we do see from the early church, I just want to make this plug because I'm getting my doctorate in New Testament context. So I've learned a lot about the Greco-Roman culture and the Roman Empire and how it influenced the early church. What we see are patrons in the early churches. They were wealthy, influential people in their cities who partnered with ministry leaders, and the lines blurred. So yes, elder and deacon, there are certainly church designations.
Right.
But then we have Lydia's. It's like she was the home church leader, but she was also dealing purple cloth and dye, and she was also influential in the city. So who is she? What is she? Well, she's lots of things. And I think we tried to narrow it because we want to put people in categories.
Right.
But it just doesn't work like that.
Agree. And I think too, we also, I think, struggle with understanding that your work, whether it's affiliated with a local church or a parachurch ministry, is ministry. That how you love people, especially, and I think about the field of network marketing, it's so relational. It's so built upon leadership, compassion, care for others, depending on, you know, what your product is, how you market that, how it benefits someone else. But it has so much interrelational ministry opportunity that I think it sometimes gets hard for people to go, oh, like, is it ministry? Is it work? Instead of understanding that your work is what you're called to do. And especially for someone who maybe is a lay person and isn't a part of any paid ministry church staff. Okay, final question is how can someone in network marketing glorify God with excellence in what they do?
Yeah, I thought about this question. I'm glad you gave it to me ahead of time. Two things I would say. First, the fruit of the Spirit is the standard for Christian leadership and Christian life. So when we get overwhelmed with the question of like, how am I supposed to glorify God? What decisions am I supposed to make? What am I supposed to be doing with my life? Who am I? We need to level down a bit, take a breath, and then just go back to the fruit of the Spirit. The evidence of God at work in our life is fruit of the Spirit, evidence of the Spirit's work. And when the Spirit is at work in our lives and impacting others, it's loving, it's joyful, it's peaceful, it's bearing patience with one another, right? We know the fruit of the Spirit. And if you don't, you can go look them up in Galatians 5. And maybe Becky can send that to you later. But there's a list. And it's not an exhaustive list. Doesn't mean those are the only things that are fruit of the Spirit. But they're definitely water lines for us as Christ followers to go, when I work, am I loving and joyful and peaceful and patient and kind and good and gentle and self-controlled and faithful? And if I am, then that's glorifying God because it's the Spirit at work inside of you. And then I would say the other thing that came to mind, and I think this was from the Spirit, Becky, was this story when Jesus sends out the disciples. And he says to look for a person of peace.
Hmm.
And that person of peace becomes the person who hosts them in a new city, clothes them, feeds them. And network marketing is very much like that. You're looking for the people who are looking for you.
Yes.
When you're in network marketing, you're not trying to like persuade someone and force someone to do something they don't want to do. You're trying to find the people who are looking for what you're offering. And that's a lot like how the early church got started, where it was like, look for a person of peace, look for the person. So I think if we aim to be a person of peace for others, a catalyst for others, someone where they feel at home and where we build them up, that also is evidence that we're glorifying God.
Love that. Can I ask you a couple fun old questions from your past in Arbonne?
Yeah.
What made you consider it in the beginning?
I was desperate to pay for seminary, and my friend gave me samples and she said, try this. And I was like, this is the dumbest thing. I'm not doing this. I don't even know if this is legal. You know, all the questions people have.
Yes.
This is probably illegal. She's probably making it in her garage. And my husband was the one that was like, your face looks amazing. I don't know. So he thought the products worked, and we've gotten a seminary bill. And I remember going, somebody in this house is going to have to make some money to pay Dallas Theological Seminary. That's what led to it. But, you know, Becky, the reason I stayed was the relationships, what you just mentioned. And I still have all of those friendships now. And just, I love supporting them. I love supporting the company. Yeah.
You know, fun overlaps, just fun background stories. Okay, so Arbonne's new CEO came from Plexus. She was with us. So Arbonne has a brand new CEO. We love her.
You trained her up, huh?
We trained her up well. Our CMO is from Arbonne. We love him. He is incredible and has been such a gift to us this past year. But what's so fun to me is that my sponsor in Plexus, Andrea Mitchell, who's on this call, was once on your Arbonne team.
I recognized your name.
Let's just talk about the spider webs of how God works and how he knits us together in the spirit. But how fun is that? I mean, I used to, when I was in seminary, Andrea would invite me to her Arbonne parties and I'd be like, you could not have chosen a more broke friend to come to your party. I can't buy anything, but I sure will take a sample.
Right. I will take a sample home. You know, what's funny, Becky, is that the questions you were asking earlier, you know, do we have permission to do both ministry and network marketing? Do we, you know, it's neat when I'll meet someone in Dallas and I'm like, did I sell you eye cream? Did I invite you to a polished event? Or did I teach your kids in Sunday school?
Exactly.
But you know what? We know that people are multifaceted. We know that our pastors have interests that go outside of Bible study. Right. So I think we need to have permission to be multi-passion people where people get it. We have multiple things that we enjoy in life.
And I think, you know, one final plug, because you mentioned, you talked about Lydia's persuasiveness and you said, you know, it was her sales background. And I think part of it is permission to be who he's made us to be in his glory. Really to point it, you know, I remember telling Andrea, but I cannot do this. I'm a therapist. I'm not a salesperson. And what I've realized is I'm not a salesperson, but I love to tell people what to do. I love to be persuasively bossy. And I'm laughing because I'm thinking, you know, we were together on July 4th. And what were all of us girls talking about? How to do our hair. Kat was giving us a play-by-play of how she does her curls. We were saying, well, I watched this tutorial and used this product. Like, I think we undervalue the persuasiveness of how God may or may not have made us. Some of the people on this call might not feel as persuasive, but they are deeply motivated by helping people or deeply motivated by serving others or deeply motivated by growing as a leader. And I think oftentimes network marketing, because of its history, gets a bad rap where people feel like, well, I can't do that like with gusto because the Lord wouldn't be in that. And I see a lot of twisted thinking there. So I
Yeah,
appreciate
and
you
there's like
clarifying that.
there's no Enneagram number or like spiritual gift test that identifies you as someone who could be good at network marketing. It's just like any other industry. You're going to have educators who are super driven, super bossy, super compassionate, super compelling at the front of the room, really great at the back of the house with the parents. Like, we need all different kinds of educators, all different kinds of doctors. Of course, we would need all different kinds of network marketers. And ultimately, it comes down to, do you believe in what you're sharing with people? But
Right.
there are awesome parallels that I learned in network marketing that actually helped my faith. And it wasn't my faith helping network marketing, it was the other way around.
Right. Right. Because so much of network marketing is leadership development, can you talk a little bit about the Boldly Conference? And then I'd love for you to share about Saints and Sinners as well, since they launch next month.
Yeah, ladies, I would just love for you to be a part of the Boldly Conference coming up in October. I'll be one of the keynote speakers. If you live near the DFW area, come in person, or you can watch online. But we exist to embolden women in their faith and in their work. And what I love about the Boldly Conference is we don't sit down as a leadership team and think about our revenue goals, although those are important if you're a part of a nonprofit. We don't think about revenue, we don't think about celebrity, and we don't think about platform. We really think about how can Christian professional women make connections with each other? How can we have conversations with one another? And how can we build our confidence in ourselves, in what we do, in our faith? And so if that interests you, come to Boldly. We would just really love to have you. It's put on by the Polish Network. And the speakers, some of them you may not recognize. And PS, they might be the first female owner in the NFL to own a team. Like, they're freaking awesome. Like, they're not best-selling authors maybe, but these women are such credible, influential leaders that have been in rooms where the only woman, they're the first on the team, they're the first in the C-suite. And we do a really good job, Becky, of making sure it's not all ministry people. It's not all network marketing. You're going to have doctors, lawyers, all sorts of women in the room, and all different ages. And I love that, because you've got the older women in the room who are like, listen, I'm 70. We weren't even allowed to be in these rooms, so let me tell you how to do this. So that's that on Boldly. I hope they can come, and I can send you guys a link if you need it.
Would love that. Tell them about Saints and Sinners, because we had a lot of Bible study participants on this call.
Okay, let me get it. I'm so glad I wore pants today so that I could get up from my desk just now. There was nothing on my pants. Okay, you guys, so I wrote the storyline series. There are 6 Bible studies in this series. And if you thought I got energized about women in the Bible, I'm so glad Becky's doing it this the end, so I only have like a minute, because I could talk about these Bible studies until the cows come home. But I think a lot of us are bored. I think we're just bored in the scriptures. I think a lot of us are following checklists and reading plans, and I love those things. But I think we just kind of go through the motions sometimes, and we miss that God is an artistic, brilliant storyteller. It's insane how he weaves stories from Genesis to Revelation. And what I do in my studies are make those connection points and help people see his storytelling brilliance. So Sinners and Saints, those Bible studies come out in 3 weeks. I would love for y'all to pre-order. I mean, there is not money in publishing unless you're like a bestseller, but I am proud of my work, and pre-ordering proves to Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all these retailers that these are the kind of titles you want. So when you pre-order, it sends a message to everybody that, oh, wow, okay, people are interested in Bible studies. They're interested in this author. But Sinners and Saints, Becky, it's about 10 New Testament characters. So in the Sinners book, I highlight a lot of women, not all women, but I highlight a lot of women who would have been marginalized figures in their context. They would have been overlooked and devalued because they were the wrong ethnicity, they were the wrong religion, they had the wrong socioeconomic status, they had a bad reputation, and yet they exhibit more faith in Jesus than some of the religious elite. and they're extraordinary. So that's what I do in Sinners. In the Saints Bible study, I cover 5 New Testament men, and they just happen to be guys, you guys, like, this is not shade towards men. I love men. But the 5 characters are Pharisees, Sadducees, a chief priest, Judas, Peter, Paul, all people who failed Jesus at times. They're really complex characters. And so I show through that Bible study, I was really wrestling with my faith, Becky, really disillusioned with faith leaders that keep falling from grace and proving that they were in it for the wrong reasons. And that we see some of that in the New Testament, that people like Caiaphas were just trying to hold on to some power. He really wasn't looking out for the best interest of the Jewish people. And yeah, so anyway, I had a blast writing these studies. They're 5 weeks each. And that's all I have to say about that.
Well, I appreciate it. And I have pre-ordered, so I'm in. I'm excited. I'm really grateful for you. I know you've got a busy life like all of us, and I know it's way hotter in Dallas where you are. Just saying, just a little extra plug for Northwest Arkansas, but still hot here. So yeah. Thank you so much for hopping on. I also just want to say thank you for being a forerunner. Thank you for being someone that jumped into network marketing back in the day. And I am grateful for how the Lord has used you, and I'm grateful for how he is using you.
Thanks, Becky. You're amazing.
All right. Thanks, Kat. Have a great day, guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you later.
Bye, y'all.